Welcome to Bled Talk, the podcast where insightful conversations meet language learning. I'm your host, Samuel Bledsoe, and on this show, we dive deep into a variety of topics with fascinating guests from all walks of life. Whether you're an English learner looking to sharpen your language skills, or simply someone who enjoys thought-provoking discussions, Bled Talk is something for you. From engaging interviews to solo episodes filled with knowledge and inspiration, join us as we explore the world one conversation at a time. Get ready for a journey of learning, curiosity, and meaningful dialogues. Welcome to Bled Talk. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Bled Talk. We have a very special guest. Her name is Megan Rage, and she is on Instagram, she's on TikTok and YouTube, and she does a lot of great videos helping people learn English, kind of talking about culture differences between the United States and Brazil. And she just has so much great content that I recommend every single one of you go and find her, follow her, and watch all of her videos because they're fantastic. But we'll go ahead and we'll get started with the conversation right away. Megan, could you tell us a little bit about you and kind of how you got to where you are today?
Yeah. So as most people that follow me know, I have my husband is Brazilian. And it's actually kind of a crazy story how this even came to happen. I live in the state of Washington, which is in the upper left corner of the United States. If there's any Brazilians watching on here. And I had a Brazilian exchange student at my high school. And I became really good friends with him. And after he left to go back to Brazil, we stayed in contact, and he invited me to go down to Brazil to spend Christmas and New Year's with his family. And at the time, I was 17. I did not speak any Portuguese at all. I had actually never traveled outside of the country. I don't even think I had traveled by myself before. I didn't have a passport. I knew nothing. Luckily, my parents let me go. And so I got my passport, got my visa, got all that stuff figured out. I got down to Brazil, and I just fell in love with the country. And this guy, he actually lived in Cuiabá, which for the Americans watching is dead center in South America. So you the route that I take is usually from Seattle to Dallas, and that's a 3.5 hour flight. And then from Dallas to São Paulo is another 10 hours. And then there's only a couple of flights a day that leave from São Paulo to Cuiabá. That's another 2-hour flight. So it's about 24 hours total of traveling, which is a lot.
Yeah.
And but when we got there, we were there for 4 or 5 days, and then we took a road trip from Cuiabá all the way down to Floripa or Florianópolis, which is, I guess, close to where you live, right?
It's pretty close. I think it's maybe I would say 5 hours if you were to drive.
Oh, 5 hours. Okay.
It's not far at all.
Yeah, so it was really cool on my first trip. Everybody knows Rio and São Paulo. Those are, I feel like, the, when people think of Brazil, they think of those cities. Cuiabá, I want to say, is the Kansas of the United States. It's so far away. It's a lot of farmland, and yeah, so it's not some place that a typical tourist would go. If you were gonna go tourist in Brazil, you'd be
I would say it's like the St. Louis of the United States, because Kansas at least has the Kansas City Chiefs and everything, but St. Louis doesn't have anything at all. No reason to go there.
But you have to go there with a purpose. You don't just end up there. So anyway, so that was crazy. And then also too, I look very American. I'm pale, I have blue eyes and blonde hair, so I was very out of place. And people knew right away that I was American. But then we went down to the South, and I feel like there's a lot of lighter skin, blonder, lighter eyed people in the South. So it was kind of cool to be able to see the different regions of Brazil on that first trip. And so we stayed there for 3 weeks. And I actually went to an Ivete Sangalo concert on New Year's. And that was, I think, that was the 2006, 2007 New Year's. And I loved her music, and it was the most fun concert I've ever been to, but I didn't know a single word of any of her songs. So that was also another motivation for me to come back and like want to learn the language. So I came back after that trip, and I had made a ton of friends. And of course, this was during the time of when they had Orkut. I don't know if you know Orkut, but it was like the Brazilian MySpace at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had that, and then Facebook was pretty new, so no one was really posting on Facebook. I don't even really think Instagram was around at that time. And then we had MSN Messenger. So I got a lot of people's contacts on there, and I kept in touch. I came back to the States, and I started my freshman year at the UW in Seattle. And they had Portuguese classes and Portuguese 101. So I was like, oh my gosh, I got to take that. So I got into that class. I did 101, 102, 103, completed the first series, and I feel like I had a basic hold on the language. So I planned another trip for the summer to go back down to Brazil. And on the second trip, it was like a whole different experience because I could speak the language. I had already been familiar with a little bit from my previous trip. And then I feel like my Portuguese teacher she was a gaúcha. She was from Porto Alegre. And it really helped to learn from a native Brazilian, because with the language, you also learn a lot of cultural like aspects of Brazil. So I kind of went down with a lot more tools on the second trip. And through kind of a roundabout way, the exchange student who had gone to visit the first time had introduced me to my husband at a party, and it was on a Thursday night, and I was leaving on Saturday. And kind of a funny story, I got introduced to him, and he thought I was from Argentina because I'm like blonde, and he was trying to speak Spanish to me, and he didn't believe I'm an American because, like I said, Americans don't go to the city. Like, this isn't some place that Americans end up at. So I was like, well, I'm leaving on Saturday, so I guess I will see you later. Well, come Saturday, turns out I missed my flight. So I got to go out one more night with all my friends, and I ran into my husband again. And that's kind of when I got all of his contact information, and I found out that the girl I was staying with, her boyfriend was really good friends with him. So I feel like I had a connection, and I just felt like, kind of like secure and like safe and in that, knowing that he was a mutual friend of a bunch of my friends. So then I came back to the States, and we kept in contact. I think I went back a couple more times, and then in that year, and then the next year, which was my junior year at UW, I planned a study abroad in Cuiabá, and I studied at UNIQ, which is like the university in Cuiabá. And I think it's the only one there. I think it's a public one, I think. Because isn't it the private one you have to take the test to get in?
I think, well, the public ones usually you have to take.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so this was a private, this was the only private one, I think. And then the public one was the one that you take the test for. Okay, yeah. So I had a friend message on my behalf, seeing if I could get in there and I could take classes as kind of an exchange. And so I was the first actually American to ever do that because they never had anybody go there. So they got me all hooked up, and I signed up for, it was Engenharia Ambiental, which is environmental engineering. But we did like Portuguese language classes. It was kind of just a basic course. If in the United States you sign up for business, you're going to take a lot of basic classes. So it was kind of like the lower tier of that major. So, I did a humanities class, and then I did a few classes, basic classes like that in that major. And then my Portuguese got really good because I was having to do homework in Portuguese. I was having to go to class and listen to, the teacher speak Portuguese. And so then after this trip, during this trip, my parents had come down from the States, and my brother, and they met my husband in Cuiabá, and they stayed there, and we showed them around for like 10 or 12 days. Then they went back. And then I got my husband's tourist visa to come to the States with me for the first time. So we came back and spent Christmas here. So he got to meet the rest of my family here. And it's so funny because in Cuiabá, it is so hot. It is like 40 to 45 degrees Celsius. Like it's just insanely hot. Like you can fry an egg on the sidewalk. And they just have this sun that beats down on you. And when we got to Seattle in December for Gustavo's first trip here, it was 5 degrees, but it was really sunny. And so we're like, the plane is taxiing in from the runway to the gate. And he's looking out the window and he's like, oh, it's sunny. It's like, I don't need my jacket. And I'm like, no, it's 5 degrees outside. He's like, no. He's like, but it's really sunny. And I'm like, yeah, it's 5 degrees. So he's like, okay. So we get off and we go through the airport. And of course it's warm because you're inside. But we get down a baggage claim and one of those doors opens and the cold air came in and he just about died and it was hilarious because I don't think he'd ever seen the sun, like full on sun, and then have it be cold. So it's just so different, the contrast. So he stayed for that trip and then he went back to Brazil for another month. And then he came back in March for my birthday and we went to Vegas for my 21st birthday and he proposed to me in Vegas. So then we got engaged on my 21st birthday. And then we started the K1 visa process, which is the fiance visa. And that took about 9 months. And he could not enter the United States during that process. So I had to apply on his behalf. He went back to Brazil. And while we were waiting for that process, I went and spent another, I think, 4 months down there. So I had like 1 quarter left of school. I had graduated a little bit early. And then I think I left in like June and went down and stayed with him, or July until October. And then when his visa got approved in October, he came in December and he's been here ever since. And then we got married so he came in December 2010 and then we got married February 2011 on the 88th day because we had 90 days to get married. So, yep. And then we just had gone back and forth. But he didn't speak any English at all when I met him. So that was like a big motivator for me to, like, I had already wanted to learn the language before I had met him. And my English or my Portuguese wasn't that great when I met him, but I could, hold a conversation. But, when you're, living with someone who, he ended up learning English, but we don't speak to each other in English. We mainly speak in Portuguese just because it's more natural. Imagine trying to like speak to your spouse in some other language all of a sudden. Like it doesn't.
Right. Well, and you end up laughing at each other too. Like I tell people all the time, one of the hardest things to do is to speak English with my wife because I met her in Portuguese. I learned about her in Portuguese. I flirted with her in Portuguese. Everything that happened in our life happened in Portuguese. And so it's like the difference between when you tell each other that you love each other, like in English, it's not the same as when you say it in Portuguese. And so with her, I completely understand you. Sometimes it's just, you can't, as much as you want to, and you want to practice.
Yeah.
This doesn't happen.
No, it's just like, and I talk about this with bilingual education for your kids. So we spoke Portuguese exclusively in our home with my daughter. My kids are 6 and 8. And with my daughter who's 8, we only spoke Portuguese with her. But when she started going to school, they speak only English at school, obviously. And I feel like when she came home from school, she wanted to tell me how her day was, but she wanted to say exactly how it was in English. Because, when you try to tell a story over, sometimes it gets lost in translation. If you're watching like a funny movie in English, sometimes I'll do that. And my husband, he won't like get the joke. And then I'll try to translate it in Portuguese. It's not even funny anymore. You know what I mean? Like it's hard. So I notice a lot with my kids when they want to tell me how their day was or how something happened. If it happened in English, they're going to tell me exactly how it happened. They're not going to try to translate it. So we run into that a lot.
Imagine. Yeah, my son is 1, so we're still figuring out how to go about doing that. I talk to him in English, but he's 1, so he doesn't respond.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the hope is that hopefully he kind of has that mixture. And I know some people who get really nervous about not, him not being able to learn English very well or Portuguese very well. But I mean, there's been a lot of studies that have been done about it, and most of the time it's a little difficult at first, but they end up being much better in their grammar when it comes
Oh,
to
yeah.
both languages if you just teach them both. But that's a really good. I think this is a really good part for us to go into, like how. So we know where you came from and kind of what you went through, and that's how you kind of got exposed to Brazil. I think that is an awesome story. And how did that turn into Megan Rage on social media? How did you start sharing culture? How did you start wanting to help people learn English? Like what took you to that?
So, I mean, I guess I was surprised at how many people actually needed like guidance or help with this. I mean, I don't know anybody else that's really personally, I don't know anybody else that's in my situation. Like all of my friends, married people from here, they don't have like a bilingual household. So I just kind of thought that this situation was more unique to me than it is. And I will post something on Instagram, kind of a joke about like, oh, my husband's like Brazilian and he does this, and then I'll get like 200 comments of people saying like, oh my gosh, that's me too. And so it's kind of shocking to see how many people can relate to you on that level. I mean, whether it be the English or the, Portuguese English, or if it's like a habit, like I posted a video about my husband taking naps on the floor, and it's such a Brazilian thing. Like, I don't know if it's a regional thing, but like, I feel like everybody said that was the most relatable video because, in Brazil in the afternoon after you have your lunch and you're like so full and it's so hot, like you just lay on the tile floor because it's like the coolest place to be. And it's funny to see how many people can actually relate to that. So I guess now I'm trying to kind of go in that direction, and it's really cool to see the sense of community there is within that like very specific niche.
Yeah. It's interesting because you kind of think that you're alone. You go through the process, you do a lot of things, and sometimes people don't realize it, but it's hard to marry someone in general because you have different personalities, you were both raised differently, and that's when you're from the same country.
Yes.
But when you're from a different country, something that my wife and we kind of realized after a little while is that sometimes the reason that we do something isn't because it's us. It is us, but it comes from our culture. It comes from somewhere where we grew up. And so, sometimes we'll be talking about something. For example, my wife, she really likes the house to be super clean all the time. And I grew up in a house where it wasn't something that we did all the time. Or for example, like she expects me to, in Portuguese, I say passa pano, right? Kind of squeegee the floor. And in the US, I never did that. I never had that experience. And so there's some things that we kind of realize that you have to go, oh, it's more than just that person. It's a culture. And so I think that community, there's so many people that feel alone, but like once you connect with people, like for example, I told you about my friend earlier who's from the US. He also married a Brazilian. And so, we talk to each other, and sometimes we'll say, hey, is this normal? Like, does this happen with you too? Do you think that weird? And all these things it helps us know that, okay, it's not just me, there's more people who are going through the same thing.
Yeah, no, I totally, and I was just having a conversation with some of my friends the other night about like the kids taking showers every day. And like in Brazil, like, okay, so one thing, living in Cuiabá, it's so hot. And I used to take a shower in the morning and like get ready for work or school or whatever I did. Like that was my thing. Like every morning I would take a shower. And living in Brazil, it's so hot and you get so sticky and sweaty that you take like 4 showers a day. And then one thing you always do too is like take a shower right before bed because you're just like, you just need to like wash off everything from the day. Like everywhere you've been, you're wearing like flip-flops, like the floor, the ground is dirty, like, So, I mean, here I never did that. But then after living in Brazil for so long, when I come back, it's just like, people are like, you take a shower like every night? And I'm like, yeah, I have to. Because, it's a learned habit, but it is cultural. It wasn't me before. It's something that I adapted to, I guess. But then I've like brought it here, So it's just, I mean, there's a lot of things that I can think of like that,
Yeah.
And yeah.
It's really interesting, and it's fun. And so that's kind of like you were talking about. That's what helped you kind of get traction on social media and things. And do you think by attracting that community and those people, did that kind of help you decide to move forward with helping people learn English as well? Or
Yeah,
did
definitely.
you always do that since the beginning?
Well, so I had a really good friend. He's still my really good friend. He helped me so much with Portuguese, and we would chat on MSN Messenger every single day. And he did not speak any English, and I was learning Portuguese, but we kind of helped each other out. So I would type in Portuguese, he would type in English, and then if I wrote something wrong, like if I said like "il vai lá," he would say no, it's "il vou," So he would correct me in writing, and then I would say, oh, okay, "il vou," and then he would write something in English, and he would say like, I have go to this place, and I would say, no, I have to go to this place. And so we would have a conversation, but in the conversation, we would be like correcting each other, And so we kind of had this mutual understanding of like, okay, if she writes something wrong, I'm going to correct her. If he writes something wrong, I'm going to correct him. And by the end of we talked like all the time, and he was like speaking fluently in English. He was doing so well. And I mean, he still speaks English, to this day. But I mean, it helped my Portuguese so much because I'm a visual learner. And, it's one thing to hear it like my kids, that we talk to them in Portuguese, but I don't know if my daughter were to like pick up a book in Portuguese, how she would do. It's totally different to be able to read and write. So putting those two things together, typing or reading and writing, I guess, paired with the speaking, and then having that like one-on-one, connection and help, being able to ask questions or, have someone explain why something is the way it is, was super helpful. So I hope to like be able to mimic that. I mean, on a larger scale, obviously, I'm not going to be able to chat one-on-one with everybody, but I just hope that I can I did start a WhatsApp group for people to chat. And I think that's helped some people because there's like a Portuguese chat and an English chat, and people can, chat and, maybe like find a buddy and, chat one-on-one with them. But that was kind of my idea behind doing that, for people to be able to find, another person that can help them like that,
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I remember when I taught English like the first time, it was really good to hear people correct me in Portuguese and kind of have that mutual respect as well for each other, because it's like there's I don't know if it's a meme, maybe it's a video that's kind of going around recently where it's talking about how when somebody speaks another language, they might sound a little uneducated in that language, but that doesn't mean that they don't know things. It doesn't mean that, a lot of people say, I'm a lot smarter in Portuguese than I am in English, or I'm a lot smarter in English than I am in Portuguese. And I think that once you understand that and you both help each other, you understand that like, hey, Megan speaks English natively. She speaks very well. She can correct me. And I speak Portuguese natively. So we both are very, very smart in our own languages. And so we're just trying to help each other. Because I think sometimes people get a little offended, because of corrections. I tell people there's also a way to correct people. Sometimes people think that it's easier to just like call you out right there on the spot. And it's not the best way to do it, obviously. But, for example, most of the things,
like ruin the flow of the conversation.
yeah, like because what happens is if you correct someone in the middle of the conversation, you make that person think that she didn't listen to anything that I just said. She listened to me.
My error or my
Yeah.
yeah.
And so I told my wife, because in the beginning she would correct me, like she should. But I told her, I said, if you can kind of wait until the end of the thought, or just wait until a certain spot and then tell me, be like, oh, you said amapa instead of umapa. And I'm like, oh, kind of do that. And I think it really helps. But also being corrected like right away, I think you almost remember it more, because I remember a friend who, his mom, she corrected me, because in Portuguese, there's two verbs for like leading something and like taking care of it. And I always thought it was like liderar, but there's one that's liderar and then there's one that's lidar. And I was like, I don't understand the difference. So I would always use the same one. And then one time I got corrected and I was embarrassed. But after that,
But you
I
didn't
never
forget.
made the mistake again. I continued doing the right thing. And so that's really cool. And would you say that when people reach out to you, do they reach out to you a lot more for English, or just kind of like to have a conversation about culture and things?
Well, I get a ton of messages from people, and like I wish I could get to them all, but like I just recently found a hidden message inbox, and there's a lot of messages in there that I haven't gotten back to, but I get a lot of people saying like, hey, I'm also an American married to a Brazilian, and we have a 3 and a 1-year-old, and I really want to know how you were able to like teach your kids Portuguese. Or they'll say like, I'm engaged and we're trying to come to the United States. Like, what was the visa process like? And then as of late, like the last week, I've been getting tons of messages about English classes. So So I feel like it's either people relating to my situation in terms of being married to a Brazilian, or vice versa. Sometimes it's a guy saying he's Brazilian married to an American, or
He was
like, yeah. So however it works out, somehow they're relating to my situation and they want to know how to navigate. And so I try to share through my content in kind of a fun way,
right.
How
Try to give them a like,
yeah, like our family dynamic. Like my husband and I only speak Portuguese together. I speak mainly English to my kids. My husband speaks mainly Portuguese to the kids. But then, there's situations, of course, when you have people here that don't speak Portuguese, so then we all speak English, just try to be respectful of, the fact that they don't understand.
Yeah. No, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
Nobody likes to hear somebody speaking another language around them, because they think like, oh,
they're like, you're talking about me. No. But my mom, she knows certain phrases. Like if I say minha mãe, she knows I'm talking about her. She's picked up on little words like that. So yeah, but yeah, I just think people, and then I think there's a kind of like a misconception about kids that if you try to speak to them in 2 languages, that they're going to get super confused. And in my experience, I don't think that's true. And okay, don't quote me on this, but I did hear this on another podcast. It was like a linguistics podcast. And they were saying that children who are not at an age to speak yet, they recognize the language by the tone. So for example, in Portuguese, you know how like the tone goes up at the end. So you're like, tudo bem? Like, você quer ir pra lá? Or, like everything at the end goes up. And then in English, it's more like, how are you? Like the tone the sound at the end of whatever you're saying has a different, it goes down. So they were saying, and this goes for any language, they say that the children would, in our case, identify Portuguese by the tone, and they would identify English by the tone. So they're not getting confused by the words. They're actually able to distinguish the languages strictly on the tone, because they're not old enough to speak. So that kind of gave me some peace of mind in hearing that. And my daughter was able to perfectly pick up both languages just on our own.
It's just be
But
patient. Sometimes they're scared that it's not going to work out. But the thing is, people learn, children, they adapt quickly, they learn really fast. And so, it's, I understand that because I've had that worry, but since I started teaching English house, so we've done a lot of studying about the language and things like that. And every time I see someone talk about kids, it's always talking about everyone believes this, but it's actually, not as bad as people actually think it is.
100%.
And so also kind of along the lines of talking about language and things like that, what kind of tips would you give someone who is trying to learn English, or, maybe somebody's trying to learn Portuguese and trying to talk to their spouse? Like what would you give as like a general language learning tip to people?
Well, I would say that one of the main things is that you need to be motivated. And if you have like a really strong will to learn it, you will. I tried to learn by any form necessary. So I worked at a Brazilian restaurant, to talk to people, to Brazilians, because there was a lot of Brazilians that worked there. So that helped me. I listened to Brazilian music. I got some of my favorite books. I love John Grisham books, like mysteries, and I got a couple of his books in Portuguese. And I could get through, most of the page, but then I would like underline a few words that I didn't know, and then that helped me learn as well. Like I said, I chatted online with some friends, and then obviously, I guess my biggest motivator was that my husband didn't speak English. So, I mean, what other choice did I have? But, try to make it fun. Like, don't, put too much pressure on yourself. There's a lot of really cool ways to learn. Like I said, music was a really fun one for me. I found some Brazilian music that I liked, and I would look at the lyrics and try to imitate exactly how they were singing the song. And I feel like that helped a lot with my accent. So, depending on, if you're a reader or if you're more of a visual person, maybe go that route. And then, I like being social. So I liked to chat online with my friends from Brazil. And but I just think that one of the biggest things is to be motivated. Also, don't be afraid of being corrected. So you can't have too much pride.
Yep.
You have to, take some constructive criticism there, I guess. But, it's not a bad thing to be corrected, because if you are scared of saying something wrong, then you're not going to learn as much. And I feel like when you go out there, like you said, you go out with confidence and you just say or try to say what you want to say, and you get corrected, then that's great for you, because now you know how to say it right. And if you speak with confidence, you're going to speak more and you're going to learn more. So I would say those are a couple big things that I would, keep in mind when trying to learn a language, because it is a journey. And I feel like I have a pretty good hold on the language, but I'm still learning a lot every day. Like, there's a lot of words I don't know, and I'll ask my husband, like, how do you say this? And he's like, I'm like, oh, okay. But I don't think I'm ever going to be done. So yeah. So you have to have that in your mind too. It's about the journey.
Yeah, well, and there's so many people who, when they work to learn a language, they feel like they have to get to fluency. And I think, I don't, in my opinion, I'm not some linguistic professor with 20,000 years of experience, but in my opinion, fluency isn't necessarily a goal as much as it is a process. I think that when you have a goal to do something, for example, if you have a goal to be able to communicate with people about your daily life, that's a goal, right? And when you get there, that is a part of being fluent. And because, I could tell people, yeah, I can talk about virtually anything I want to talk about, but I say that, and then tomorrow I'm going to have a conversation, and it's going to be some biologist who wants to talk about, biochemistry, and I have no idea.
Yeah, I know.
And I tell people, and I was like, it's okay if you don't know those words, because, like, for example, in English, I'm a native, but there are things that I don't know how to talk about in English, because I just don't know the vocabulary. And so I always tell people kind of like, go part by part, don't think that you have to understand everything at once, understand the things that are most common to you and then branch out after that.
That's so true when you say that, because when I did my study abroad at the university in Cuiabá, we had to give a presentation, and I was like pretty confident, like in speaking, like I could talk to anybody about a range of different topics. But when I had to get up in front of the class and speak formally on a specific topic, I just froze up. And I think I was up there for like 20 seconds. And then I was like, well, okay, I don't know what else to say, so I'm done. And it was actually pretty mortifying because everybody was looking at me, but I feel like they understood because I'm American and like I didn't
Right.
I don't know, but it's a totally different realm of the language. So it was really, really hard. And I don't think I've ever been lost for words like I was up there. It was awful.
Yeah, no, I understand that. In my church, they call on people in the congregation to speak during the main meeting. And one time I got called on, and it was weird because the topic that I was given was really complex. Like most of the time people are always like, we'll talk about your faith or, talk about how the Bible has helped you or this. And the guy comes to me and he's like, hey, I want you to like compare this kind of thing from your culture with this thing in our culture and like make this thing. And I was like, okay, I don't know how to do that, but I will, I'll try. And it was difficult because it's like whenever I had tonsillitis and I was like, now I have to learn the word for tonsils because I don't know. And I have to go to the doctor and be like, hey, these things in my throat, but after a while now I can tell people tonsils are amygdalas and like,
Oh, okay, there you go. See?
who knows that, right? But now I know it.
Yeah.
So I always kind of compare
Now
it.
I know it.
Yeah. Well, and I compare it to like when I was a kid, my family wasn't very rich. And so our first car wasn't, the brand new car and everything. There's always things that were breaking. And my dad was not the kind of guy to take the car to the mechanic. He would say, hey, we're going to work on it. We're going to fix it here. And so I didn't know anything about cars before I started driving. But after I drove a car and had so many things break and this and that, it all just kind of added up. And I learned how a car works because I had to go through the process of fixing it. And so I think that can apply a lot to language as well.
It's definitely a process. And I really like what you said about how you should kind of piece things together in terms of how they relate to you or your life. I don't know. I just think that's going to get you the furthest, because if you can kind of build a strong foundation on that and then branch out from there, that's where you're going to, get your biggest impact.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. And I think one last question, because we're getting close to the end, but since you kind of talk about this, and we talked about this a little bit already, and I didn't even prepare you for this question, but I'm curious as to what your response would be. What kind of advice, I think that's the better question. Yeah. What kind of advice would you give somebody who does marry somebody from outside of the country, whether it be, marry or when they date? Like, what would you tell somebody who's getting into an international relationship on, to help them understand and make it work and not let culture be something that gets in the way?
Okay, so I was actually thinking about this when we were talking about the clean house thing. I think 100% you should go live or visit. Maybe not live. Maybe, depending on your situation, you need to go live in that person's culture and understand, spend enough time there to understand how they live and like maybe how they grew up. And it's really going to help, your relationship, because like we were talking about this, you said your wife really likes the house really clean, and my husband's actually the exact same way. And it's not a personality thing. It's a cultural thing. And then there's another thing. I feel like in Brazil, like what's the word? Oh, ciúmes.
Oh,
I
jealousy.
feel like yeah, but I feel like that's like such a strong thing in Brazil. And I feel like here, like bringing my husband here, he was so like, who's this? Who's that? I'm like, oh, that's like my neighbor, or like, you know what I mean? Like just random things. And I wouldn't have understood where he was coming from had I not lived down in Brazil to see the relationship dynamics. You know what I mean? And I feel like here you have a lot of friends that are girls and guys. It's just like American culture. But in Brazil, you don't really have that. And so I feel like I didn't, I wouldn't have taken it the same way here had I not lived down there,
Right.
you know? So it really helped me understand where he was coming from and to get that. So
Yeah.
I feel like going and living in the other person's shoes per se, and getting a handle on where they've come from is going to be really helpful.
Yeah. And just talking about that, I remember when I got married here, we were talking about groomsmen and bridesmaids. And here in Brazil, I didn't know this because this didn't make any sense to me, but I learned about it, is that the groomsmen and the bridesmaid, they have to not only like walk in together, but they have to be together. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Like a couple,
yeah,
or
they
like
have to be a couple. And if you invite one, their other half has to participate and be part of the wedding party. And because we had talked about that, and I was like, that's so strange. I actually had a groomsman that he didn't want to be a groomsman because his girlfriend at the time wasn't invited to be a bridesmaid. And I thought that was just so crazy because, just a couple months later, I went to my friend's wedding in the US, and I don't think any of the bridesmaids were with any of the groomsmen, if that makes like we were friends, and I knew who the girl was who I walked next to, but like,
but it's
she
just
was just,
understanding. It's like
yeah,
you have the groomsmen and the bridesmaid, and then you just funnel in
that's it. Yeah.
order. That's it. And then you just, but yeah, in Brazil, like I think the groomsmen, okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. You have like 6 groomsmen. They all walk in on this side with their date, right? And then you have the bridesmaids with their dates on this side. Is that right?
I think so. I got married during.
I mean, I don't know if this groomsman has to be with this bridesmaid per se, or like I thought that they were like couples. So if I was invited to be in a wedding, it would really be an invitation for me and Gustavo to be in the wedding. You're invited as a couple. You're not invited individually.
Yeah, here that's the case, and in the States, and like the girl who walked next to me in my friend's wedding, like her boyfriend was there and like was sitting,
Yeah,
he was there, he watched it, and there was no problem, and like you said, it is a cultural thing that I don't think we understand, because for us, in our culture,
it's just how it is.
Yeah, when you have friends, and obviously there are people who are more jealous than others, but like in general, it's not. And no, there's so many things, and but there's other things that I like. For example, cleaning the floors in Brazil. Like, you just throw a bucket of water on the floor, and you just start scrubbing,
squeegee,
and then it's over. Whereas like in the
Here,
States, you have to mop and do this and so much more.
well, here we got like a Dyson and like a Swiffer, or like
Right.
like different little tools for different things. And then they have like the one, like you said, the bucket with the water and the soap.
If you have a squeegee and a broom and a bucket, you can clean anything.
Yeah, no, that's true. No.
As in, and that's another thing. Like, for example, when my wife cooks, she uses she only needs a fork, a spoon, and a knife. That's it. Like,
Oh yeah.
she can make anything with just those 3 tools. And I'm like, yeah, we could have this spatula, you could have this and do all that, you could have a mixer and all these things, but you don't need that. You just need these things. And there's just so much more that you kind of learn. And I almost tell people, like, I'm almost, I think, more grateful that I do have that experience of being able to live with a whole nother culture and and it kind of creates your own personal culture. There's no group, there's no couple that's going to have the same thing that you and your husband have, and I don't think anybody's going to have the same thing that I have with my wife. But kind of created like an Americano Brazilian type relationship, and I like it. I think it's fun.
No, it is cool. And the thing that I like about living in Brazil is like it was such a simple life. And I feel like American culture is so much stuff. Just like you talk about the kitchen, like the tools, like my drawers are full of like all these different utensils and like different sized plates and bowls and platters and like but that applies to everything. Like, in my bathroom, I have like 5,000 creams and like
There's
hair
a
products.
cream for the right toe, and there's this,
Yeah, like
the special soap for the special thing.
yeah, and like I just feel like it's so like in Brazil, I appreciated the simplicity of life. And you don't I feel like here a lot of things are overdone,
Yeah,
like Christmas, for example.
I agree.
you know
100%.
But I mean, like, you buy your kid a really cool toy and they just want to play with the box. And and that's one of the things I really appreciate about my husband, because I feel like he grew up so different than I did. And he didn't have all these like distractions with all these, toys and the Nintendo and the, all these different things. And he'll make something super cool for my kids to play with out in the backyard, like a zip line, or like a something they can jump on, or something they can swing on, or just, invent some kind of game out of nothing. And I think it's really cool because you're kind of forced to use your imagination, and, you're not overtaken by all of these, material things.
Right.
So I really appreciate, I guess, that aspect of like the Brazilian culture. And I love that that's like my kids get to, have a part of that. So I think that's really awesome. Yeah.
There's so much, and I think, and I've had this conversation before on the podcast, is that sometimes we start to kind of judge things and see things through our there was a lady who, she said, like, your English glasses or your Portuguese glasses, like you get very narrow visioned on things, and you kind of don't see the big picture of what you can have and what you can be, what you can do. And I love that you brought that up, because there's so much that you can get, and people are different, and I like to say that people are different, but everybody's the same, because, I think something that really unites people, especially from like different cultures, is, something funny, like when like a woman in Brazil will talk to another woman in the United States, and they both talk about their husbands and find out that that he is annoying in the same way for both of them.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
it's just something that helps you connect. It's something that
Yeah.
you hear about it. And I think that is what's most important as well. Like what you said, going and finding that culture, but also I think making those connections, finding things that you like within the culture. If you really love Brazilian lasagna, then, make that important.
Go for it.
Make it, make it something that you really want, or the pizza or whatever, or feijoada. It's something that you love to eat. I told my wife, I was like, no, we're going to, when we go back to the States, we're not going to go and just start eating all this pre-made food that, we eat at Americans. I was like, I want to bring Brazil,
That.
and something else I tell her is like, my son is Brazilian. He's American too, he will by default, but he's Brazilian, and I don't want him to forget that. I don't want him to do that. It's like how we talk about how we have different chapters in our stories, and Brazil's not a chapter in my story. I don't want it to be. I want it to be in the rest of the story.
Oh, that's cool. About the we still make rice like every meal. So, it's something that you just get used to, and then you can't get rid of it. So
Right. It's just,
but I mean, there are aspects that you bring, and then they're like incorporated in your life, and then that, I guess, becomes like, part of who you are now, as opposed to something that is now,
Before my wife met me, she never celebrated Halloween, and
Oh, there you go.
I think I tell people it's funny. I love Halloween like a lot. It's one of my favorite holidays, just because it's so different.
Yeah.
It's such a, because, Christmas and Easter, those are all great. They're fun.
Yeah.
But like Halloween is just so different from the rest of them that I like it so much. And, now she likes to decorate for Halloween. She likes the idea of maybe watching some scary movies or,
Yeah.
our apartment buildings are starting to do like trick or treating and things. And so she's excited for that. But yeah, it's just kind of seeing things. And I think also realizing that, whoever your partner is, they're going to appreciate you trying to participate in the culture. I'm sure there were times when you saw your husband doing something American and you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. He's doing something that he wouldn't normally do, but he's
Yeah.
trying. He's trying
Like
to.
he got a riding lawnmower, and so he's like on the John Deere like tractor in the backyard. It's so funny because like we were talking about the toolbox and stuff, and like how in Brazil I feel like nobody has like the American garage is something that's
That's
like
a
nobody
whole.
has ever seen.
Yeah.
And I never seen like a Brazilian garage like the American garage. It's like walls of tools and like tractors and wheelbarrows and shovels and like all this random stuff that you will have. So my husband now, he, like I said, he rides a tractor, and then he'll be out like fixing the sprinkler and just putting Christmas lights up. He'll get up on the ladder and put Christmas lights on the house, and just like a bunch of different things that I feel like in Brazil you would either hire out or you don't do yourself.
Right. Exactly.
So
No.
he's getting it.
Yeah, and it's fun. It's fun to see and participate. It's like the Festa Junina here in
Oh
Brazil.
yeah.
Like, it's one thing that at first I'm like, oh, okay, cool. But then, you go and you participate and it's fun. It's something interesting. And like I said, people, they like to see you try and different things. But we're getting close to the end. And so I really appreciate your conversation, everything that you had to say. And I know that there is so much more that can be said. And I'm sure that there's other conversations that'll happen in the future. And that also goes out to everybody who's listening as well, that if you do have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the comments or send us a message on Instagram. If you listen and you want to ask Megan, send her a message. Or if you want to ask me, you can send me one. And Megan, you're more than welcome to come back on the show in the future if you want to. But I really appreciate your conversation and everything you shared with us. It was awesome. It's fantastic. Do you have anything that you want to say before we end?
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is the first podcast I've ever done, and it was really fun. And I love chatting with you and getting to hear a little bit about your story. I know we're kind of in opposite positions here. I mean, we're both American, but I, went down to Brazil and met my husband, and we're back in the States. And you went down to Brazil, met your wife, and you're still in Brazil. So it's really cool to hear, I guess, kind of a similar story and a different perspective. And I really enjoyed our conversation. So,
and like I said, everybody, if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask, and don't forget to follow Megan on all of her social media. Because I'm sure you will love her content, and anything that comes in the future is going to be as great, if not better. So thank you once again, Megan, and we'll see you guys next time on Bled Talk. Thank you for listening to Bled Talk. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us for more content. We are on all of the popular podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and we're even on YouTube. Don't forget to send in your questions and your suggestions. Thank you once again, and have a great day.